Um, Welcome to Viva Farms. My name's Rob Smith, and I'm the operations director of Viva. I get to kind of be involved with a lot of training program we've got various aspects of what we do, but some of those are workshops that are open to farmers that are both involved with Viva and then also folks that kind of in the region in general. Tonight we're offering a workshop on crop insurance. And I guess I would also say too that this workshop is also running at the same time as our practicum program, and our practicum program is a 9-month course where we're operating a farm parcel here at Viva Farms. And so we're now kind of in the last portion of the practicum program, and we're shifting gears to talk about kind of business management, different aspects of sort of farm business administration. And so I would also say that this is running at the same time as the practicum course, so thank you to practicum students for opening up the class, the workshop. And I know that several of the folks who are coming are over at the parcel because they were rushing to fill an order and came up short a few bunches. So they're like scrambling to get that work done, which is great. It's a good reflection of real life challenges that farmers have. So we're talking about crop insurance. We're going to talk sort of about insurance in general as a risk management tool, and then talk about some specific crop insurance programs that are available to farmers. Historically, crop insurance was something that was available to large-scale farmers, big commodity farmers, and there was not any programs that really made sense for smaller, mid-scale, diversified growers. And now there are some of those programs. So we're going to talk about some of those, and then Diane, whose last name I don't know exactly how to pronounce.
Sukavathi.
Okay, thanks. Sukavathi? Yeah, Sukavathi, who is owner and operator of Jello Mold Farm, fresh cut flower business here in the valley. She'll be showing up and just talking about her experience because she has used some of these programs as a smaller, diversified grower. So hopefully you can hear it right from a farmer's mouth as well, how those programs have benefited them. So let me go ahead and get started. Just pointing out too that this workshop and a lot of things we do are funded through federal grants and our ability to kind of help get information on these programs out there. So this is specifically a USDA risk management agency grant that's allowing us to put on this workshop. And also that is allowing us to put on this workshop bilingually in English and Spanish. So you'll hear Kate from WSU in the back, and she's doing live interpretation into Spanish. So thank you, Kate, and our partners. Maybe before we really dive in, just because I know some folks know each other, maybe we can just go around and say our name and which farm we're from, or kind of organization, or whatever it is. Yeah, so maybe we can start here.
I'm Amy. I own and operate a wholly grown farm. We rent land here at Viva Farms at 6.5 acres of vegetables and flowers. This is our fourth season farming.
My name's Andrew. I have Regeneration Farm, which is a new part of the new Viva South campus now in King County.
Hi, I'm James. I'm just one of the practicum students. I'm hoping to start an incubator farm next year at the earliest.
My name is Erin. I live for Silverado.
I am Erica.
I'm Patrick. I work at Orange Star Farm down in Monroe.
Orange Star.
Orange Star, yeah.
Cool.
1 acre diversified vegetables.
I'm Anna. I'm on US staff. I'm the marketing manager.
Cool.
I'm Kate, everyone. I work with the VC.
Cool. And again, my name's Rob. So I just want to just kind of housekeeping. I don't know if you guys saw, but there are restroom facilities just kind of right out this door. Anyone needs to use those, and a hand washing station. And is this working to have this door open? People, is that okay? I don't know. I guess if you start to get cold or like the wind blows, or we can close it. And there's a heater we can turn on here. It's kind of one of those things where it was really warm like an hour ago, but now it's, so if anyone starts to feel cold, just let me know. Cool. So, kind of went over this a little bit, but we're going to talk about insurance as a risk management tool in general, and talk about specific crop insurance programs, record-keeping tools, and then at the end we'll have a little evaluation if you all would be able to fill out an evaluation that helps us, document the workshop in general. So, and then I guess I did not, but like I mentioned, we're going to have a guest speaker arrive as well. Insurance. I don't know, you all probably have lots of different types of insurance in your lives. Car insurance, hopefully, health insurance, hopefully. You might need flood insurance. I have flood insurance for my house, and it flooded, and it was really good thing. When we talk about insurance in general as a farmer, we're kind of talking about insurance as a risk management tool. And risk management, really like, it sounds maybe cliche or something, but you can never completely eliminate risk. You can manage risk, and insurance is a tool to help you do that. So when we talk about risk in general, we're talking about, what are the chances that something negative is going to happen, and what kind of consequences might that have for you. So when we talk about like farm-specific risks and farm business risks in general, we kind of break it down to like 5 specific risk areas: production risks, marketing risks, financial, legal, and human. Those are areas that all have their own implications. You guys can think about any number of risks in those areas. Like, what's someone, just for example, like what's a marketing risk? What would be an example of that for a farmer in general?
The market conditions abruptly change, causing something that's in demand to no longer be in demand, or maybe a contract gets canceled.
Sure. Yeah. And so definitely James mentioned like contracts as a way to, in a way, a contract in and of itself is sort of a risk management tool, right? You're trying to kind of eliminate some of the variability, maybe it gets canceled, or you think about like on a national scale, like tariffs and that kind of stuff, like all of a sudden, like the price of soybeans is like in the tank right now, so those farmers are kind of left holding all of those products. The price changed, right? And that's something that you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, and obviously there's ways that you can try to like hedge against that, so that, is it diversifying your customer base so you don't just have all your eggs in one basket? Is it like, lots of different ways. Contract would be a really big one. How about, I don't know, like what's an example of a human risk? I think. Something that on farms, like humans in some ways are kind of like the most risky part of it. Fall off the ladder. Sure. Yeah.
Human error can cause the product to become spoiled or unsafe.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So and what would be a tool to kind of manage human type risk on the farm? Do you think? I feel like I spent a lot of time talking about this when we talk about like food safety risks in particular.
Education.
Yeah. Training.
Standard operating procedures.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Safety protocols?
yeah, so like, policies, procedures, and then obviously being able to do trainings on those with your employees, right? Which takes time and takes money, but you could invest that time in doing those trainings with your employees and then potentially, save a lot of headache down the line. So just examples of like, get our brains thinking about like specific risks for farms. And when we talk about crop insurance, crop insurance can really kind of manage several of these main areas, production, marketing, and we'll talk about that, financial, certainly. So we're going to talk about those in a little bit. In the meantime, whoever is operating a farm here, or if you're managing a farm, I mean, how many folks have these types of insurance? Does anyone have any of these currently for your farm? Two or three. Oh, okay. Are people generally familiar with like these types of insurance? This is not exactly necessarily farm specific, though the product liability insurance sort of is. But general liability insurance. Does anyone want to kind of take a crack at general liability insurance? I mean, essentially, if you're operating a business, really general liability insurance would be those types of insurance that, if a worker injures themselves, right, or a visitor to the farm slips and falls, and those sorts of things, right? Like that's sort of covering, sort of like just by the operation of your business. What are the activities that you're doing as a normal part of your business, and how are you, guarding against those, right? So really, like, any kind of business really is going to be having general liability insurance, and you could pay for different limits, right? Like you could have insurance that's, $1 million of coverage, right, or $2 million or $5 million, which seems like a lot of money, but it really, can go pretty quickly if there's, depending on the scale and reach of your business. Yeah, if you've got like a U-Pick operation or something, you've got people coming on your farm, and if there's some big event where all these people get injured, you could easily be reaching those limits. So, general liability insurance is definitely something that most businesses operating everyone should have, and most do. Commercial business insurance is a little bit different, and those might cover those activities that are not generally covered as part of your normal farm operation. So an example could be, I like to use the one of if you have like a pumpkin cannon maybe on your farm, right, where you're like loading pumpkins into a cannon and firing them into a field, and people are paying you money for that. That might be something that is like not typically going to be covered under like a farm insurance, right? So it's sort of a specific venture that you have that you might want to insure against, because you can imagine with a pumpkin cannon or something along those lines, it doesn't take too crazy of an imagination to imagine how that could go horribly wrong.
Our insurance, the separate business, commercial business insurance, was detailed out that we needed to have coverage under that umbrella for any farmer's market, because that was off the property, that was as a commercial enterprise, etc.
Yes. That's a great example. Probably better than a pumpkin cannon. I'll admit it. Can I use that? But yeah, so that's a great example of, and Mike was saying that, a farmer's market was not covered under their general liability insurance because you're traveling to a city and you're on a city street and you're kind of conducting a specific enterprise that's not really related to the farm, even though, of course, we all know that it is very related to the farm, but it's off-site and it's sort of its own specific venture. So that's a really good example of commercial business liability. And what, depending on what your farm was, if you've got agritourism activities or whatever it could be. And then the third one would be product liability insurance. And that really is specific to farms in a lot of ways. And that really insures your product once it leaves the farm. So it's got really big implications for, like, food safety would be a really big one. So if your farm made someone sick and they decided to sue your farm, generally general liability insurance would not protect you against that. You would need to have an additional insurance policy, which would be product liability insurance. A lot of customers are actually going to require you to have product liability insurance and to have proof of that. So I know, for example, if you want to sell on the Puget Sound Food Hub, or if you want to sell to Charlie's Produce or any kind of larger buyer, Whole Foods, before you even get in the door, they're going to want to make sure that you have that product liability insurance. And a lot of times they're actually going to want you to get a certificate from your insurance company that names them as additionally insured. So a lot of larger customers are going to require that, so you have to kind of communicate and have your insurance company issue you another certificate with that customer's name on it. That, really specifically, if there's any food safety issues and someone says, I got sick and I'm going to sue Whole Foods and I'm going to sue the farm and I'm going to sue, that they're kind of double covered in that way. So this is like Viva Farms' certificate of coverage. This is proof that we're insured, and there's kind of a number of things that you'll see here. But one is that it's this really small number, but it's $5 million per occurrence. So if there was something with Viva Farms, any sort of incident that someone tried to sue us under, there's $5 million of protection there, which is a lot. But like I say, it can things are really expensive, particularly when there's lawyers and legal fees and whatever it is. So that's what I was talking. Any questions about just kind of general types of insurance? I kind of like to sort of start talking about that a little bit initially, just to kind of separate some of those, just because as much as people are here, we're talking about crop insurance, you want to make sure that you're really kind of covering your bases. So, Amy, yeah.
Do you pay for product liability insurance separately now? Okay. And if you do, how much tentatively ballpark me per year?
And it's kind of funny because all of this comes down to, I should almost preface this whole thing by being I'm not an insurance agent, so you might talk to 3 different companies and they're going to give you 3 different prices, and it's kind of one of those things there's not really necessarily a standard. I do know that a lot of farmers in this area use an insurance company that's Campbell Risk Management, and they are not based here in Skagit. I don't know where they're from. Indiana. Yeah. But they're a company that a lot of small farmers use, and they'll offer product liability insurance relatively cheaply, maybe
$275 a year.
Okay.
For a $1 million, $2 million coverage.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so $275 a year, as Kate said, for 1 million / 2 million, which the distinction of those is sort of general operating stuff, and then addition, it's all kind of legalese, but up to $2 million of coverage, which is pretty affordable, I think.
And that's general liability? Or
They'll do both, yeah. But you definitely, when you're talking with them, and with any insurance company, you want to say, hey, I'm a farmer, and how does this relate to my product liability? You know, and they'll say, like for example, like for us, it's all just listed under general liability, but we know, we have it in writing from them that it covers that in the marketplace. Some companies may have them listed as separate lines, like it just sort of is kind of dependent upon the company. Yeah. But you just want to make sure that you don't want to have a situation where you've bought a general liability insurance policy and then someone gets sick off your products and sues you, and the insurance company says like, oh, actually, well, ours doesn't cover that. You know, you want to make sure that it's pretty explicit.
Does Viva need commercial business insurance for anything, like for those specific cases you were saying?
Yeah, the pumpkin cannon we used to have.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah,
Byron,
yeah.
this one.
Yes,
May want to be-
it went to a terrible problem. No, we don't. But like for Viva, like even just a couple of years ago, like we lost our insurance carrier. Like they just said, hey, you know, we're not going to renew your policy. And it's like, it was like really hard to find someone to insure Viva because it's like pretty risky in terms of just all the people who are involved and the equipment, and people are sort of like, what do you do? You know, and so, yeah. Cool. Any other questions about just kind of general insurance stuff, farm businesses in particular? And I'm, you know, and I'm, yeah, like I said, I'm knowledgeable on this stuff to a point, and then there's like insurance agents that know a lot more about it. Yeah, so we're talking about crop insurance specifically. There's two main programs that we're going to talk about. So I think we'll talk about one, and maybe we'll take a little bit of break, stretch our legs, then we'll kind of talk about the other one, and then by that time, I think Diane will be here. You guys still doing okay? Warmth flies? Feeling good? It's nice that you do work. It's actually really cool. It's not work. So crop insurance. Like I was saying, it's kind of a relatively new thing for small, organic, diversified farms that they're able to kind of have access to federal crop insurance programs. So these programs in particular were part of the 2014 Farm Bill on a federal level. And you all know that they're like negotiating the next Farm Bill like right now. I don't know if you know that, but it's time to like call Congress people and stuff, because a lot of this sort of stuff is they're reconciling between the Senate and the House like today. So anyway, just put that in your radar. National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, NSAC, is a really good place to get information if you're interested at all about farm policy, which I am. Relatively new, 3 to 4 years old. And one program in particular, which is Whole Farm Revenue Protection, is now available in every county, in every state, to every farm, which is great. And it took a lot of hard work of policy people to get those through. So hopefully the idea is that farmers are going to want to take advantage of these programs. And we're going to talk about them right now, and then hopefully it makes a lot of sense. Crop insurance history, just like a super brief rundown. The 1930s, right, there was the Dust Bowl, and there was large-scale environmental degradation of our farmlands, and erosion, and wind, and drought. And there were no programs that, like, there was no safety net. And you all, hopefully know some of the history, but a lot of farmers kicked off their land, economic collapse, the Great Depression, all these things. Kind of in response to that, Federal Crop Insurance Corporation was formed in 1938, and again, it was really available to larger commodity farmers, and all the way from the 30s up till the 80s, there was, different kind of federal acts that came into place, Federal Crop Insurance Act, and crop insurance was sold by the private sector, so the government itself did not sell crop insurance. It was subsidized by the federal government, but they were private insurance companies, and there was lots of benefits. I mean, you all, maybe you've heard about, there was different types of crop insurance programs that would pay farmers to not plant dairy or not plant soy or corn to keep prices up, and it's a whole fraught political situation that we're not necessarily going to go into, but just knowing that there's kind of a lot of history there and power dynamics, and obviously the smaller diversified farmers weren't really at the table as much. You don't all necessarily need to know all these dates or anything, but different types of programs where farmers had to be insured to be benefiting from USDA programs. That's now not the case. In fact, a lot of small-scale farmers are benefiting from USDA programs without being insured. In the Risk Management Agency, which is part of USDA, was formed in the 90s, and they've kind of been running that program ever since. In the late 90s was the first whole farm revenue insurance program, and that was not very widespread. Again, was only limited to certain farmers with certain levels of revenue and certain crops. And then, like I mentioned, in 2014, whole farm revenue protection was created. So here we are, and now we're in 2018. These are, so this particular, the whole farm revenue protection program is something that that makes a lot of sense for small growers, and we'll hear about it from Diane in a little bit. So again, insurance, like any kind of insurance, it's as a risk management tool. It's sort of like you're buying into it to hopefully protect yourself against an unforeseen loss, right? So it's something you have a choice to do whether or not you want to. But as we kind of look at some of the costs and stuff, you start to kind of weigh, if I put a few $100s in, I might potentially save myself tens of thousands of dollars in loss. So it's something I'm thinking about. So it protects against natural disasters, hail, drought, flood, insects, pests, disease, what they call natural disasters, and that is not something that stems from like poor management or so you can't say my crop got completely destroyed by insects, because they're going to say, okay, well, what did you do in your practices, right? So if you're kind of able to demonstrate that you're following good practices and there's still a big issue, then at that point, the insurance will kick in. But it can't just be like, oh, I sit back and, oh no, look, my plants got eaten by bugs and I did nothing to try to stop it. They definitely want to make sure that there's no efforts made. Price fluctuations as well. So if there is a big change in price, they can kind of help make up for some of that lost revenue. And then just, sort of those two things would be like yield insurance versus crop revenue insurance. That those are all kind of covered under this program. We're just thinking about different ways that, I had less yield or the prices were different. You can, this insurance will work in both of those instances. Yes?
Maybe we'll go more into this later, but I'm curious if, I could foresee in terms of, if you're talking about insect damage on a crop and you're growing, say you're not spraying, you're growing organically.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with where those dynamics come into play, how much Yeah, just like how much leeway producers who are not growing conventionally have
Yeah.
for those practices.
Yeah.
And like if something were to happen.
Sure. Yeah. So the question was sort of about, organic practices or sort of more sustainable practices or no spray practices or whatever it is. And if they could sort of use that as like, well, yeah, there's bug damage, but it's because you didn't apply some insecticide all over this.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I can speak to that like super specifically, but I do know that in these programs, like even when you talk about like price fluctuations, like they're very keen to the fact that organic growers exist and they take that into account. So like even the price fluctuations, like the prices that they're going to base that off of are related to organic pricing, if that makes sense. So really like, organic farming has gone from this like niche market to now where like there's big organic and there's those people are also at the table and influencing these kind of political decisions. So my sense is that they're not, they wouldn't pull that card because you would, like if you're going to be basing your projections off of organic prices, you have to provide them your organic certificate. Like they know that you're organic, so I think that would be a pretty easy one. But that being said, I can't say it's never happened, but I think less and less. There's a few things. This is sort of just like a really general overview. We don't need to worry about all these acronyms, but really just sort of helping farmers manage risk. We've already been talking about that. And some of these things that you'll have to kind of know throughout this process. So you're going to have like your production history. You're going to have some records around that. You're going to have records around what your actual revenue is currently. And like I said, these are kind of different components, like yield protection versus natural disasters versus revenue protection, which has to do with price. So these are just sort of the types of crop insurance listed here are sort of like a big overview for all sized operations, but really the one that we're going to be talking about, whole farm revenue protection, is kind of most appropriate for small farms. Yes.
Maybe you'll get into this when you talk about record keeping, but if you were like in your first season of production, are you eligible to apply for crop insurance, or do you have to have records?
So that's a good question. So if you're in your first season, you're not eligible for whole farm revenue protection, but you are eligible for the next type of insurance we're going to talk about, which is non-insured disaster insurance. But we'll talk more about the eligibility because there are some things there that you need to be doing, and it relates to taxes and relates to those sorts of records you need to be keeping. So we'll get there soon. So whole farm revenue protection. Like I said, it's available in all counties nationwide. And it's available for any farm with revenue up to $8.5 million. So if anyone here makes more than that, I understand if you want to go. Buy us all some ice cream. So up to $8.5 million, and that's sort of what the USDA. That's beyond that. There's other programs that those farms would be going for. And specifically available to farms that are kind of direct market, local market, regional farms, and farms that grow specialty and organic commodities. And so, like I said, like this program actually in particular sort of is for these folks. So they're, the people at the USDA, if you were ever, kind of making a claim on it, like they would. That's why this exists. Yeah, like I said, and due to the advocacy of lots of like champions of small scale farms, that this is now happening at the federal level, which is great. So like I said, insures against loss of revenue to natural causes. It provides a carryover loss if you're insured the next year. So myself not being a tax lawyer or anything like that, or a tax advisor, but I do know that with this program, for example, if you had, let's say a $30,000 loss on a planting, that you can sort of spread that loss out over subsequent years to offset gains in other years to kind of lower your tax liability, if that makes sense. And we'll talk more about that in the practicum class, and actually next week we're having another workshop here that's about farm business structures and farm taxes. And we'll talk about sort of like that carryover loss. And we're going to have an accountant from Anacortes who's worked with farms kind of really be able to talk about those things in more detail, in a more authoritative way than I can. But there's some tax benefits in this stuff too. It covers losses during the farmer's tax year. So if you're insured for the 2019 season, let's say, it will protect during that season. There's some, essentially, and it's for when that crop would have been harvested and sold. So if you're planting things this year that are going to overwinter, they wouldn't be protected under this year's insurance, if that makes sense. It's the year that it's harvested and sold. And that will be the calendar year if you do your taxes based on the calendar year, or a fiscal year if you have a different fiscal year for your business. And again, we can talk about that. I mean, you can ask questions and maybe we can crowdsource some of the answers, but I'm not a tax expert either. But maybe next week. So the coverage. It protects against the loss of farm revenue, which is both commodities you produce and commodities you purchase for resale, not including forest products. So for any folks that maybe you run a CSA and you're buying any product from other farms, or a farm stand, or anything else, this will protect against the resale items as well, as long as they're food items. Like, it's not going to protect like hats or whatever it is else you might be buying in. Essentially, for the revenue coverage part, we'll talk about the process of signing up for this. But essentially, what you see up there, the approved revenue amount, that is something that will come, that's based upon your history, right? Essentially, how many folks are familiar with Schedule F? People file Schedule Fs at all? Yeah. So Schedule F is a tax return that's specific for farmers. I think that's why they call it Schedule F. I'm not sure. And the Schedule F essentially is like any kind of independent contractor or anything. If you're filing taxes, you have a 1099, right? That's sort of like and you file a Schedule C for any business. A Schedule F is a lot like a Schedule C, except it's just for farmers. You don't need to know all of this, but essentially the real difference is a Schedule F, all the income and expense categories on it are all things that farms use. So like fertilizers and irrigation equipment, and it's a really good way when you're organizing the finances of your farm and the different accounts that you track to kind of have it correspond to a Schedule F. And we'll talk a lot more about Schedule F next week. But the reason that I bring it up now is because the Schedule F is the way that the USDA is going to that's the document they're going to use to prove that you're a farmer and that they're going to measure your income and expenses based upon previous year's Schedule Fs. So a lot of farmers, when they're starting out, and it's their first year, will make the mistake of like not using a Schedule F. They'll just use a Schedule C, or they won't do things that are specific to farms. And that has implications down the road, because if you're trying to use USDA programs in any way, like you need to have a Schedule F, or else they're not going to consider that. I mean, obviously they'll know that you're a farmer, but they're going to say, well, if you don't have your Schedule F, that's what we're going to, that's the baseline. So for beginning farm businesses, like start filing Schedule F like right away. Because you need to kind of develop that baseline. So when I talk about the approved revenue, essentially what they're going to do is they're going to look back at your years of Schedule Fs, and they're going to take an average of what those are, and then they're going to approve a certain amount of revenue that you are allowed to use as your baseline for insurance. So let's say, we'll do 3 years, right? And there's the first year, you sold $10,000, right? And the next year you sold $8,000, and then the third year you sold 12, right? I'm just kind of making really round numbers, right? The average being 10,000. Yeah. Right? So that's all on your Schedule F, those numbers. You file those for 3 different years, and they say, okay, you've got that amount that is approved, right? But then you say, okay, well, yeah, I've made this amount, that amount of money for the last 3 years, but I am expanding my operation, and I did all that on 1 acre, and then this coming year I'm actually expanding to like 5 acres, right? So it's a conversation with those folks to get you to, you say, I think that instead of doing $10,000 on 1 acre, I'm gonna do $60,000 on 5 acres, let's say, right? And you're going to be increasing your efficiencies. You're going to be cutting your costs down relative to your income, and so I'm going to be like profitable to that, let's say. That's going to be a conversation with them, but the great thing is that when you talk with USDA folks about this, like they take into account expansion, and they want to hear about how your farm's changing, and they'll arrive at an approved amount, right? And so that will be, let's say it's $60,000 in our example, right? So you've got your approved amount, $60,000, 5 acres. Again, if for whatever reason there's a decline in price, or quality, or there's a flood, or a giant crop failure due to like poor germination, any of these types of things, and you drop below your approved amount, this kind of crop insurance will get you back to that number, if that makes sense. But only to a certain point. So the insurance that you get, the whole farm revenue protection, will range from 50% to 85% of your expected revenue. So the insurance in this instance will not, saying, you've got your actual sales wind up there. Let's say there's a big, there's a big flood late in the year, and you lose a big planting of all your overwintered crops, and then another crop you have has really poor germination, and you only wind up making $40,000. If you have crop insurance at a level that at 50%, then they'll pay you 50% of the difference, right? So the difference being $20,000, right? So they'll give you $10,000 to kind of make you relatively whole. right? And that's the lowest level of insurance that you can have under this program. And it's based on the number of commodities that you have. So they reward diversification. So if you've got lots of different crops, it's a cheaper premium for the insurance. And I'll talk about the cost in a minute. But just knowing that you can purchase from 50% to 85% coverage. Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure most people think of insurance that if you actually use it, they raise up your rates, and is that? If you're, would they do that here? Because if you have a diversified crop with other income streams in your farm, and then okay, 1 year this crop goes to poop, and then second year 2 crops go to poop, and you're trying to figure out what it is, and then like it takes 3 years for you to get back up on your feet. Would these farms still support you, or would these programs still support you?
Yeah, they would, and because they're federally backed, subsidized programs, like they're not like there's not like a repeated loss clause.
They're not.
They're not. But that's a good question.
Yeah.
And like what were you at?
So the cost and premium subsidy, this kind of relates to, again, small scale diversified growers. The cost of it really depends upon the county, the types of crops you do, and the diversity of crops. So later when Diane's here, we can ask her about the cost as a diversified grower here in Skagit County. There's not like this is what it costs. The next program we talk about, there actually is like a price associated with it. And the reason that there's not with this is that this program, you don't buy directly from the USDA, you buy from an insurance agent. So this is still a private program, but it's backed by the federal government. And we'll talk about how to find insurance agents at the end of this little portion. But farms with 2 or more commodities. So how many folks here grow or are planning on growing more than one thing? Yeah, perfect, right? So there's lots of reasons to grow a diversity of things, and one of them is that you get a bigger subsidy for your crop insurance. So the whole farm revenue protection, as long as there's other requirements, we'll talk a little bit about those, but essentially there's a subsidy that will help pay for your premium, like 67% of it will be paid for premium, or 80%, depending on the diversity of things. So like in a way, it's like, okay, this is what my insurance policy is going to cost, but like 80% of it is going to be covered. So that's a pretty good deal for diversified growers. That's something that's different about this program than with like a lot of big programs. Big farms that have millions and millions of dollars of sales are not eligible for this type of thing. This right here is a little bit difficult to chart, but essentially you can see along the top, right? This is the coverage level from 50% up to 85%. And then this is the amount of subsidy that the federal government will pay as a percentage of your premiums. So you can see along here that, this is if you've got 1 crop, right? If you've got 2 crops, 3 or more, and you can kind of find the sweet spot if you want. So for those of us who have 3 or more, like the federal government's going to be paying 80% of our premium for all of these coverage levels, and it starts to back off a little bit once you get up to this. I don't know why that is, but that's.
It seems like they're turning it up because you're going to get a higher payout if you have to claim on it.
Exactly.
But, so they're going to pay a little bit less than your.
Yeah. So with this one, like if you. This would be a 50% coverage of what you'd get back, right? If you had 85%, who wants to do some math really quick? It's 17, yeah, right? So $17,000 at 85% coverage. You know, so that's a pretty big difference even on a small scale. But again, like they're not going to pay as much subsidize your premium as much. Yeah, so you can kind of find, you know, what level you want, like what's the sweet spot. Arrows pop up. Next thing you know, there's arrows. And then the higher the commodity count on your farm, the more your farm qualifies for a premium rate discount, called the diversification discount. So again, you can see the more products you grow, the more of a discount there is. You know, so your premium will be discounted and then it will be subsidized. So I'd be curious, I don't have cost information specifically about this program because it's been hard to come by, but I think it'd be really interesting to talk with, hear from Diane, so how much did it cost you? Because I'm curious about that myself. Yeah, so they discount the premium first and then they subsidize the premium. So, you know, it already is 60% discounted and then it's 80% subsidized. Like it's, you know, unless it's like a lot of money for the premium, it seems like it's a pretty good deal. Information that the farmer needs to provide, 5 consecutive years of Schedule Fs, except the next slide is about beginning farmers because there's a waiver for beginning farmers. We actually need 3 years of Schedule Fs. And beginning farmers, according to the USDA, is anyone that has been farming for 10 years or less, or a farm business that's been operating for 10 years or less is a beginning farmer according to the USDA. So 5 years, but it's actually 3 years for most of the folks I imagine that are here. Your farm plan for the coming year. So if you're saying like, this is what I'm going to be doing this year, you know, I've only made 10,000 every year, but now I'm going to be making 60. Like you need to have kind of a plan that documents that and why you're going to be making so much more. You know, and then information supporting your expansion. So you know, more acreage. Even you're investing in new equipment, greenhouses. And this says indexed there, but I'm not. That's like a kind of more complicated way to index your income and expenses. But I'm going to leave that because it's kind of more convoluted. For beginning farmers, again, anyone farming less than 10 years, which a lot of people, you know, who have been farming for 9 years, like practically are not really beginning farmers in a lot of ways, but you are according to the USDA. Or maybe you are. Maybe we're beginners our whole lives, which is another nice way to be. So for this coming year, you would need Schedule Fs from. Actually, that's wrong. 2016, 17, and 18. Sorry, that's wrong. So like if you're operating a farm for the first time this year, or if you're starting next year at Viva, for example, like definitely start that record of Schedule Fs because it makes you eligible for like lots of programs that are specific to farmers from the USDA. And farmers in general like have a very special place in our like tax code and in our policies and the federal government. Like so there's lots of advantages to having a farm business that are different than operating any other kind of business. And so the way that you start to be able to take advantage of some of those, at least from a federal level, is those Schedule Fs. So I just want to talk about that, and we'll next week we'll have Schedule Fs and we'll talk about how they all work and stuff. For qualifying beginning farmers, receive an extra 10% premium subsidy. So like they're really trying to like get people to buy this.
At this point, it's free, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be crazy not to. So anyway, and there it says qualifying beginning farmers. I actually don't know exactly what those qualifications are, but you could talk to your insurance agent about that. But that exists. So losses, claims are settled after taxes are filed for the policy year. So, at the end of this 2018 season, if you were insured, you need to like file your taxes for this year and then make a claim. You can't do it, like, it wouldn't be like, oh no, like I have a flood right now, let's get a claim going. You kind of need to have already filed taxes. But obviously you want to make sure that you're documenting everything that happens. And I'm sure, if you call up your insurance agent and say, I have a loss, like, that's a good practice to do, but the ball won't really get rolling until after your taxes are filed. And again, that occurs when your actual revenue falls below the insured revenue, and then how much you make up that difference. So yeah, just some examples. We talked about these, but adverse weather conditions, insects, plant disease, though not from mismanagement or undermanagement, volcano, failure of irrigation supply method is a really big one. And that could be lots of different things. And again, they'll make a case if it's failure through your own actions, they would want to talk about that. But if the well runs dry, if there's like tons of minerals in the water, the drainage ditch that you pull from now isn't working for you anymore. Wildlife too, so different things. The process we kind of talked about it a little bit, but is determine your historic average over those 3 years or 5 years. If you're a beginning farmer, it's 3 years. Determine what you think you're going to be making, right? We're going to be making this. Figure out what is your approved revenue, and the approved revenue, this is kind of a bad example because you've had this really big expansion, but essentially if you've averaged $10,000 and you're not expanding, and you say, oh, well, next year I'm just going to make $20,000, and you don't have evidence of that, like they're going to only approve your historic average. So you kind of get, you get an agreement with the USDA folks, decide what percentage coverage you want, taking into account all those subsidies and discounts, and then you figure out how much revenue you've now insured, up to what level, go through the farming season, file your taxes, and make a claim if you're below that. And then the last step is they'll pay you back and make you whole up to that amount that you insured against. Yes?
Would this be on specific crops, or is this more like farm scale level? Like obviously they're taking account how many different crops you're planting, but
Yeah, it's
how granular does that get?
it is based on different crops. So I think it gets as granular just as that, like because it's all based on the number of crops you grow, and so it's really related to it's crop insurance. So it's really on it's not necessarily insurance if there was some failure in the business in some other aspect. It's really on insuring those crops crop by crop. But obviously, if there was one event that affected multiple crops, then those would all be eligible.
So would you have covered amounts for different crops, or you just come up with?
I think you kind of the whole farm. Yeah, but that revenue number is based on crops, and so yeah. So it's not, you don't have to come up with different coverages for different levels. It's more like the whole farm, but that's made up of all those individual components in your production. Yes.
Yeah, it's, I'm sorry.
So, real world example. Say you have a crop plan for a kale farm,
Yes.
and that, what did you say, black root is coming or something?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just say the farm gets black root and you do everything, you didn't,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And you did everything, but it didn't. So, say I lost 20 grand.
Yeah.
Would I go, so I'd have my paperwork, and then come tax time, what is that, April? or whatever,
Yeah,
I would say I lost 20 grand because of this crop,
Disease,
and then they would cover it based
Yeah,
on my
yeah.
claim or my policy.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you had been approved for your whole farm at $100,000, right? But you lost $20,000 in kale, right? So now your whole farm only has revenue of $80,000. They will pay you that $20,000 difference, but only up to the percentage of coverage that you've purchased. So sort of like this, where there's a $20,000 loss,
Okay.
depending on if you've purchased 50% or 60 or 65 or 80, all the way up to 85, they'll pay you that difference. And obviously the 85 is more expensive
Right.
than the 50, but also they subsidize it a fair amount, so.
And do these programs, I mean, it's for small farms, but, okay, say you only make $1,000 the first year, or something really tiny, at what point are these programs, like,
Not,
worth it? You know?
yeah. I mean, I think maybe that's a question that we can even ask Diane when it comes to.
Okay.
I mean, it's, you know, the premium is going to be based on the amount of risk that the insurer is taking on, right? So if
Okay.
it's like, you know, if you're like, I've got $8.4 million in sales and I want you to insure into this program, like I'm sure the premium is going to be quite a bit higher.
Right.
Whereas if you have 1,000, it should be pretty low. But obviously at some point, if you only have $1,000 in revenue, you know, $100 premium doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Based on what I know of insurance, I'm not an expert in whole farm, but I would expect if it's whole farm revenue and that it's based on the total farm revenue, not the individual crop revenue, and the reduction of premium based on more crops, that if you were to have a case where you lost, you know, insured for 100,000, you lost 20,000 in kale, but your other commodities that made up the 80,000 actually did make you like 110,000, they may not actually pay you for the 20,000 you lost because
Yes.
your whole farm revenue has still
Yes.
exceeded your expectations.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so did everyone hear that?
So if you bumper crop the rest,
Yeah, exactly.
Then it's a
Yeah,
wash.
I mean, they're not, that's a really good point. That it's a whole farm, so if you're able to make up that loss in different ways through your other operations, then they're not just like, it's not a guarantee.
That's why it's lower
of-
risk to have more for that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not a guarantee on every individual crop that it will reach a certain target. It's insurance that your whole farm will reach that target. That's a really good point. Yeah. So you got a purchase by Barch of 2019 for this coming year. Like I said, it's purchased from a crop insurance agent, and this is where you can find crop insurance agents. This is the USDA risk management website where you can find that. So I'll leave that up there for a minute. You guys can write that down, and feel free to email me if you lose it, or if you just do a Google search for risk management agency and then crop insurance, you'll be able to find that. I know for a lot of folks here that are kind of more at a beginning stage, this might seem a little out there, just in terms of it's like down the future, you need 3 years, and I think that is definitely the case. But also to kind of put your hat on, be thinking about some of this stuff now as a business operator, is something that's really important. Yes.
You know, I'm trying to think what you had said about the seasonality of it, because like, you know, we do mostly storage crops, so
Yeah.
let's say half of our sales from the previous season's crops come in the next
it was harvested
year.
in last year.
So would that be covered by like the 2019 program? Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like how our split season.
Yeah, I have a guess on it, but I wouldn't want to give you the wrong
Okay, no, that's
answer,
fine.
just because I don't.
Recently I'll have to look into.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this PowerPoint online?
I can send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commodities, so again, going back to, you have the kale, for
Yeah.
example. You lose 20 grand. If you have commodities on your farm that's not produce, say it's like hospitality or something else, would that count in the whole farm?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that, I mean, I think this is definitely supposed to be like, you know, I don't think it would work where you'd say, you know, my whole farm makes, it's really gonna be based on your Schedule Fs.
Okay.
Because, you know, if you said, I've got a farm and my farm has $1 million in revenue, but I actually only sell like $10,000 of crops and 400 of that, you know, is Airbnb, or, you know, like they're not gonna insure that.
Well, and we do.
Because you wouldn't
It's not.
report that income on your
Yeah, it's
Schedule
not our
F.
F.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean. So it's really, it's based on whatever's gonna be allowable as income and expenses on your
Huh,
Schedule Fs.
okay.
That doesn't mean that your business itself might not have a diversified income. And again, you know, the more complicated it gets, the more you have to like have your
Right.
tax accountant like guide you in that. And also, you know, people, I mean, a lot of people use some of the special benefits that farms get for their benefit. You know what I mean? Like that's like people have some like hobby farm and it's a horse ranch and I'm a farmer and they take advantage of all these things, but it's like they're trying to kind of crack down on that a little bit because
Okay, yeah.
it's not. Any questions on whole farm revenue protection? I'm going to quickly talk about the non-insured crop disaster recovery program, which of course the acronym is NAP. I don't know why, but that's just like what it is. Like, yeah. It's like someone wants to win the game. Anyway, that's the acronym for it. And we'll talk really quickly about it. It's a quicker review, and then we'll have Diane talk about her experience too, and I'll introduce her in a minute. But so the NAP, non-insured crop disaster recovery program, NAP. Provides financial assistance to producers of non-insurable crops when losses or preventive planning occur in natural disasters. So very similar to whole farm revenue protection, but it does not cover price. So it's really just like natural disasters. But again, that's a pretty wide range of what could be considered a natural disaster. So flooding, pests, you know, irrigation system failure, volcano, earthquake. You know, kind of like big natural disasters that we all think of, like tornadoes and tsunamis, but then other natural disasters, adverse weather, hail, those things that are, you know, more common. And it's eligible for folks that are not, that don't qualify for whole farm revenue protection, that you may not have 3 years of Schedule Fs. Eligibility varies by county, so yeah, so you know, the difference with NAP too, and we'll talk about this, but NAP you actually buy directly from the federal government, and you buy from the Farm Service Agency, the FSA, whereas whole farm revenue protection program, you're buying from a private insurance agent, and that policy is guaranteed by the government. This you're actually buying it directly from the government, and you're buying it from the Farm Service Agency, which is a different division within the USDA. And the Farm Service Agency, I know some folks here, you know, worked with FSA. They do loan programs, they do operating loans, loans to buy land. They do a lot of programs that benefit farmers. So it's good to get to know your local FSA folks.
Bro,
Yes.
what's the distinction in that last slide of non-insurable crops?
Where does it say that?
First line. To producers of
Non-insurable, I guess that's kind of the poorly worded, but more just meaning it's not whole farm revenue, like not other insurance
Okay.
types. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so those crops that are non-insurable because the grower's not eligible or whatever it is.
Okay, so it's still same crops.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. So the cost, so because you're buying it directly from the FSA, we know exactly what the costs are. So it's $250 per crop, with a maximum at $750 within a single county. So if you're producing in different counties, I think the maximum is like $1,800. But for a lot of folks here that are only producing in one county, in one location, $750 is what you're going to be paying, and that is a service fee. It's not a premium. That's just a service fee to do it. It will pay 50% of your production loss. So again, in this instance where we lost $20,000, there's not the option to do 85%. It's only 50%. And it'll pay 55% of the market price, so it's not nearly as comprehensive. But you can't buy up, like even last year you were able to buy more coverage of this program, but they changed that recently. And it's limited to $125,000. This is really sort of like catastrophic failure insurance. It's not going to make you whole, but it will help out. They pay organic pricing, as you mentioned. They're aware of organic producers and they'll recognize those pricing. And then multiple plantings of one product can actually be treated as different crops. So if you do 3 plantings of radicchio or whatever it is, cilantro, or things to really succession planting, you can get to that maximum amount pretty quickly. You can have $750 covers 3 crops or more, so you can kind of do like all of your crops from that. But there's more, because that kind of seems like that's a little steep. $750. There's more. Yes.
So is that 50% of your crops are only covered at 55% of their price, or is that like?
It's more like whatever your loss is.
Okay.
It only pays up to 50% of that loss, and 55% of what the market price for those would be. So it's like.
Is that cutting?
So
cutting the cost of your the price that you or cutting the revenue in half and cutting the production in half?
Yeah.
So it's really close to a quarter of your loss is what you would receive.
Yeah, but that may vary depending on different crops and what the price of their
it looks like it's like if you lose 1,000 pounds of beets, then we'll pay for 500 pounds at whatever 55% of 500 pounds of beets would be.
Yeah. But again, this is something that I don't know, but like the market price, I don't really know the actual detail around, like, is it a retail price? Is it the wholesale price? Like that's something I actually don't know the answer to. So, beginning and limited resource farmers. So again, a beginning farmer being anyone who operates for less than 10 years. And a limited resource farmer being if you make less than 50% of the median income in the county. That's your income, personal. You're a limited resource farmer. And they waive the service fees. So where it costs $750, it costs nothing. So those get waived. And then the premium reduction. So when I mentioned that there is a service fee and then there's a premium as well, but it's pretty low based on the fact that they're not insuring you to a huge amount. But as a beginning farmer, there's no service fees and you get half the premium is paid for. So that's huge for beginning and limited resource farmers. Yes.
So that's for beginning and or you have to be a beginning?
No, it's or. Yeah. And or. Yes. So, contact your farm service agency for more information. NAP, the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Insurance Program, because essentially it's kind of one of those things that it doesn't insure you as much, like it could be 30% of the value, but it's, as a beginning farm in particular, it's kind of like almost free. There's paperwork, so it's not, nothing's free. There's like lots of paperwork. I know like you've worked with FSA programs, maybe it's pretty involved.
It can be, but it's worth it if you can jump through the hoops.
Yeah. So this is our local Skagit County Farm Service Agency. I believe every county has a farm service agency, at least every agricultural county. So finding your local one would be useful when asking about the non-insured crop disaster insurance program.
Are Viva farmers covered by the Viva insurance, or each farmer has their own crop insurance?
Yeah, so farmers at Viva would not be covered because they're operating their own independent business. And Viva as a whole, we don't have crop insurance just because Viva itself doesn't have really much production. So no.
Are the requirements for this similar, or do you know, like, in terms of production records and revenue, like projections, how does it compare to the whole farm revenue?
Like the process of getting it.
Yeah, just like what's required in terms of records.
Yeah. So I know it's for folks that are not eligible under, that. So like you might not have 3 years of Schedule Fs, for example. So I mean, they're definitely going to want to see some documentation around like what you're planting, proof that you've engaged those activities. If you're saying, oh, I lost this and this is the price I was getting for it, they would want to see some documentation that you were getting that price, those sorts of things. But I don't know like the whole checklist. Yeah. Any other questions about that particular program? I do. Should we take like just a minute break and stretch our legs maybe and get up for a minute, and then maybe we can come back and have a chat with the gentleman. So yeah, why don't we take like quick 5 minutes and then we'll come back.
But if you went and told your on your own market,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think really,
so like then you
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I would say like it's not a figure, even if you are, it's prudent to have the profitability.
Yeah.
With the crop insurance, it's the weather or
Yeah.
it's their own.
Yeah. Yeah, so the product liability will cover if you're.
Yeah.
But if you're off there,
I was wondering what on that, what are average, I don't know if you guys keep track of it, but what are some like the very
somewhat hard. It's kind of hard to say because it varies so much by farmers. How they're farming, what they're farming, but I can feel it. Would be like half. But then going in negative, sorry. You know, and maybe like half of it.
No, but so.
That's worse. But so then even that is complicated because if you choose, like some farmers choose to, for example, if you show them make a profit and they, oh, it's going to provide import or we're gonna.
How are you? Thank you. How are you today?
Amy, we're both good. So it's like more complicated.
Evening class.
I know, and it was such a beautiful evening too. I was
But,
like,
I mean, you know, it's more just.
Sure.
I think, but. Wow! Yeah, not like, probably like,
It's
Just like.
There's so many alphabet letters. I'm just gonna write Charlie. No. That was it does not make sense because there's no thistles there.
chilling.
Think of all the plants that are all the different types.
Farmers that are like working. And she's on it.
And like,
Granted, it's not like a person that do like a
I know.
So that's what we get a lot of our data. And I see that we. So that might be the financial. We do have different farmers. And it's spread out. And some farmers.
I know. Yeah.
Kind of going forward. You know, the first year is some like we have a good place.
Yeah, like we want. I know
And
that's
then next year is
the Jello molds.
yeah.
Yeah, so we walk these all the time.
This following year again.
no, I know,
I know we've met.
I'm still, but now
Certain hours,
I'm.
market, stuff like that. So that you sort of ramp up. So
I know.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think we'll just go ahead and get started again. So hopefully, so far it's been a thrilling evening talking about crop insurance. Lots of options there, and particularly some really good, exciting stuff for beginning farmers. We wanted to invite a local farmer to come and speak too about their experience with crop insurance. So we've invited Diane. I don't know how to say it.
It's okay. I don't think you have to say it.
Yeah.
It's Sukovati.
Yeah, okay.
Diane works just.
Yeah, Diane from Jello Mold Farm.
Yep.
So maybe you could just kind of tell us a little bit about like your experience, or maybe just kind of intro and then crop insurance.
Yeah, I'm a good one for questions, so
Yeah.
let's keep this being what you want to hear about.
first thing was struck me when I got here was that there's a bunch of people here and everybody's paying attention to the thing about crop insurance. I found out about my husband and I, we built our farm from scratch and we landscaped and did stone masonry work to pay or to build to get the farm off the ground, you know, like because, you know, we needed a nice easy path, right? So anyway, so we, at a certain point we did actually get our farm. It took us about 10 years, but we got our farm to where it was paying for our mortgage and making us a living. We do cut flowers, so we're kind of specialized. And I sort of started thinking about the fact that we could lose everything. We could lose our home, one big flood or something, and we'd lose our livelihood and everything. So I was like, well, you know, that's kind of dicey. And I like all farmers, we like to gamble, right? Risk takers, but that's a bit of a lot to put out there, you know, for like a big earthquake or a flood or something. So I was at the you guys ever know about the OSU Small Farms Program convention? So I was there I think it was 2.5 years ago, something like that. And they always have a breakout. You can pick like 6 different courses to take. Well, I just noticed that there was crop insurance on there, and I thought, that could be interesting. And there was like 1,000 people at that convention. There were maybe 8 breakouts. There were like 9 people in that class. 9 people. And my husband was like making tracks for the other side of the campus quick because he didn't want to be in there either. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I started listening, and the only reason I knew to go was because a lady that I'd met at yoga class was one of those good souls that went and really worked on that last farm bill. A bunch of people did. They went in there and said, we got to take care of our small farms. It can't just be big subsidies, blah, blah, blah. And they held the line, and they got this program, and then it looks so bureaucratic, nobody's using it. And so I wanted to listen, what is this about? And kind of, some of that, you already explained all those things like trigger points. I mean, that stuff is...
I didn't talk about trigger points.
Oh gosh, it's just hard. I'm not a math head. I'm like, I just knew I want to keep my farm and my home. And I see these stories, you know, you see like somebody gets a flash flood, you know, like a farm, and it's like, and then there's pictures and there's a GoFundMe site. And it's like, who wants to have to be the one who has to rely on a GoFundMe site? You know, it's just, I don't know. Anyway, so I started listening about it, and I was like, oh, hang on. This program is really designed for diversified small-scale farms like mine. I'd been filing Schedule Fs for about 5 years at that point, so I was qualified for it. But I think even if I was a brand new farmer, I'd be paying attention and looking forward to doing it. And if it's a good reason to start filing your Schedule Fs if you're in that place, because they had an agent there, and he rushed it through. In 3 weeks, he got me in there. They need all this stuff from you. They really look at your Schedule F. They want to know, because they're trying to sort out, like I do some speaking, and I do some things here and there, and they wanted to make sure that it's only for your farm income that they'll cover. And so the question was really topical. One of you guys asked there about other kinds of income off your farm. So they look at it carefully, what we got set up with Farm Credit has an agent that we work with, and I love her. She's really solid, really sharp. She's located in, I think, Moses Lake, but she comes to the west side pretty often. She's very friendly, and she knows her stuff. And so I didn't have to worry too much. We sell most of what we grow through a co-op, and so we had a lot of really good records. And they look at what your expenses are, and they look at your income, and they index it for you. But like our farm had been in pretty heavy growth mode still, and when you're looking back, they do 5 years of Schedule F if they can get them. And so what they'll do is they'll index it, so we could get insured for more than just the average of the last 5 years. We could get insured for like what the projection of our growth was. So like I think we had it for the first time last year. Our policy cost I think $1,800, and we were able to insure I think $125,000 worth of crop, and it was a fee that we got to pay in August. They let you pay it in August, which is great because all of us have money in August. So it's like, and I realized that, okay, we were getting 75% insurance. It wasn't until I got the kind of the bill, and it shows what happens is it goes, like they have agents, and then there's an insurance company that handles it, but the federal government pays for part of your policy. And I realized that they paid for, that was a $10,000 policy that I paid $800 for. So it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. That's when I realized the value of the program. like what you're getting, what like it's like a grant basically. And I mean, this is making sense. I mean, it's so hard to talk about this stuff and have it be real,
You said you
right?
had it checked at 125?
I think it was about that. We said we can buy it in percentages. It's like seems like going to the racetrack or something. Right? You're like, okay, I'll do it. 3 shares on such and such. You know what? But it's like you could. It has to do with how many different crops you insure. That's how much you can buy. There's like if you have a diversified farm, you get more. You get more subsidy on your insurance policy. Yeah.
I was curious, knowing you grow flowers, do they count each different type?
No, and I actually went to bat because they didn't even count floral foliage crops. So they had us signed up that first year was cut flowers. Even though we have like 100 species on our farm, it's like, okay, cut flowers. And I said, well, and then we put our greens under salad greens. So, and it's very political, and USDA did add floral greens to the list this year. But I was like, hey, can we have dahlias and a few of those big crops that everybody grows? I'll hear back in 5 years. I'm one of those people that won't quit. I go in there and just kind of, come on now, how's it going on that committee over there? Remember back in 2016? But so questions. I mean, because it's such an abstract concept. That's why I want to come talk about it, because it's like I feel really, really good having that insurance. I feel like it's a very good business expense. I mean, but we're at a place where we can afford it. I didn't know about the other program that you put up there, and I thought that was a great gateway program too. But 55% of 50% is you start this is more like, I think it has like the trigger point thing is you have to have a certain amount of loss before it'll kick in, and I'm not sure exactly how that goes. So you have to report if something, like I think you have to report stuff. Like if you have a killing frost and you lose, maybe it doesn't get your trigger point, you still want to report it so that if something else happens later, like I don't know whoever came up with the idea of insurance to start. But since we all have it, this is a good one. I guess it's a good kind of insurance. I think. I mean, is that making sense? I mean.
How do you find the paperwork for applying? I mean, so
The paperwork for applying, there's a lot of it, but we didn't have to do it ourselves. Our agent walked us through it all. And they just wanted documentation, but they really want to see not just the Schedule F, but that list of extra itemized, like the addendum to the Schedule F. They want to see that too. They really want to see, they loved the fact that we went through the co-op because we could run reports on our sales for the whole year, and most of it was just right in there. Because they want to know your price on each item. But it's their job. They do their work too. But I think the one thing, if you're new getting into it, I wouldn't wait till the last minute. Because the conference was in, I think, late February, and the deadline was March 15th. And I really had to race to get that. I was an insurance agent doing backflips to get that stuff in time. And they can also, it can start at the beginning of the year, so you get that much more insurance if you get your act together and get it in there sooner. So if you have the paperwork and you think you are interested in doing it, I would contact them sooner than later. I think it's easier to re-up it than it is to get going the first time. But I do think I think we take a lot of risk as farmers, especially if we don't have other like Dennis and I don't have other kinds of income. And I just feel, I guess, a lot less exposed having that. And it would be like, it doesn't even pay out till the next year. I mean, you gotta know somebody that can help you pay your house bill or whatever. But it's just like the idea that we wouldn't just get in a hole we couldn't get out of if one thing happened.
So you don't have to make a claim on it?
No, I have not. I talked to people who have, and they said it's very reasonable. And I also know, sometimes you don't know these things, but like we have flood insurance. I mean, we're in the plains, but that flood insurance covers our structures, but not our crops. And we have a lot of perennial crops, which is different, and like woody crops, things that are permanent. And I asked them about that, and they said, well, it doesn't cover the plants like that, but it will cover your crop loss for 2 consecutive years, which is time to figure out what you're going to do, at least, and something. So it seemed reasonable to me. And even having not being able to, just having really 2 crops claim in there, we still were getting, it wasn't a lot more benefit we would have got from 3 or 4 crops. So that's good to know too if you're kind of specializing in one thing.
So is there a list somewhere where they have?
Yeah, they
the
do it. It's by county.
Okay.
It's weird. You can see the lobbying in there. It's like red raspberries, black raspberries, slightly red raspberries. You know, I know, it's true. I mean, you can see. Okay, it's true. These industry groups have gotten in here, and clearly the floral people don't have power yet. But
When you're saying with for the perennial crops, if you had loss, like total loss on those, they would insure you for the 2 years subsequent
well, it's the
to that?
crop. It's the crop and not the plants that they insure.
Okay.
And so, like peonies, for instance,
Yeah.
are at like an 18-year crop.
Uh-huh.
If you can keep them weeded. And so the thing about that is let's say you got a flood because that would kill them, and then you don't have peonies that year, so you can get payment for that crop loss, and then the next year, I mean, if you keep your policy up, then your next year you also don't have it, then you get payment again, but your plants are never back.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So that
But it's
2-year
just-
crop loss, even though it happened like in, your second or third year of having them.
Yeah.
You're sort of projected. This is how many years this is going to produce for me, but you only get the 2 years.
Right, exactly. Which is, I mean, I think we're a little bit unusual. Like, well, blueberry producers and stuff. There are
Yeah.
a lot of food crops that are kind of more long term, I think.
Yeah, I can see wildfires in an orchard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I do think, yeah.
So things like frost, killing frost, that qualifies.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. What does and doesn't qualify? Actually, one of the things that got me. You can come in. One of the things that it's warmer in here. One of the things that got me really interested was it. Okay, so it covers like anything to do with weather or like flooding, disaster kind of stuff. It doesn't cover your neighbor's horse getting out and eating your crop because you're supposed to go to small claims court for that. So it's like anything to do with people. It doesn't cover anything to do with like loss of labor. But what it does cover, which I think is really interesting, is loss of market. Like and I was really interested in this because we have a co-op, and it's a dicey industry. I mean, our co-op, we're working really hard to keep that business solid, but it's not, necessarily guaranteed. And it's like, well, 95% of what we grow goes through that co-op, and so if that co-op were to go away, I guess they said, well, the agent told me, well, you need to make a good faith effort to sell your product. In our case, we're very specialized. It would be very difficult to get all that product distributed somewhere else, especially that next year. And so that would then also cover us for that loss if we can find a channel for it.
And is that the sort of thing? There's trigger points as well. It just seems a little fuzzy to me how they define that. I know it's right, loss based on market.
I think it has to do with the price that you've gotten for it in the past. So that's
you have to kind of figure it out after.
It's not the 55% or 50% of it. It's the full amount, but it's what is it. But you know from the year before you have to schedule F history. So it's like what let's say our Dahlia bunch price was $3.12. So that would be the price. That was it. That last year. That's the price they would use. I believe. I mean, ask the agent for sure.
Yeah.
But that's how I understand it. And so it just has to do with if you buy 75% insurance. Yeah, that part I don't know fully. I think it's, I think it's like, okay, so I think it was something like, if we bought 75% insurance, that would be $135,000, but you can't collect on any of it until it drops below a certain point, and then, it's, like I said, it's a mystery to me, but here I am talking to you about it.
Are there other things that were covered that were like interesting or surprising or that you are aware of or found out in the process?
There was a woman who came and talked when I was learning about it, and that was I thought that was the best way to learn was from another farmer. And she had blueberries and cranberries and a couple of other things, and they had an issue with their blueberries and something on. Yeah, it was just crops have different things that happen in them. So I guess that's not surprising though. It's things like some insect issue or fungal thing, or it's that kind of. I'm mostly thinking about the market thing. So I don't grow food. I grow luxury items. And I'm like, if the economy takes like crazy, I could use a little bit of time to figure out what else to do. So.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I mean, just simple, as far as, I mean, you said you haven't had to make a claim, but do you have not market losses, but production losses that, systems that you have or that you have that you kind of come up with to like, okay, here's how I can document this.
That's
to
a
make
great
claim?
question too, by the way, because I don't want to ever use this insurance. I just want to have it.
Yeah.
We're so diversified. I mean, they don't recognize that we are, but we are so diversified. I mean, like, like last year, Columbine is one of the crops we grow. I mean, it's all flowers, right? So it's like, as it blooms right for Mother's Day, we have certain varieties that we really love, and so I put in like thousands of row feet so that we really nail Mother's Day, right? And I go out to start picking. I'm like, well, the flowers look really nice, but where's the leaves? And it's like there's this. I call it, the extension people. Like went my entomologist over there. I called her like, Beverly, come help me, and she comes out. And she's like, well, Diane, yeah, I have some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is it's host specific. The bad news is it's a complete loss and you can't do anything about it. You might as well give up on this crop. And it's like, well, that was a few $1,000s. And I thought, well, we farmers, we just get on, what's the next crop? What else can I harvest?
Yeah.
Right? Like, but it was like, okay, that's the kind of stuff we do. We just diversify. We never think of crop insurance for that.
Oh, yeah.
We're like we're on our toes. It's like, okay, well, if we don't do that, we'll do this. And all kind of works out for us how we farm. We grow raspberry foliage. We grow like probably 70 different crops, and a lot of them are perennial. And we just kind of roll. That's our own insurance policy, that diversification. So it's the big thing. That's the one. That's what yeah.
So what do you think? Do you have an idea in mind of like at what value loss? I guess there's these trigger points, so it's maybe preset, but
Yeah.
what for you would make it?
Yeah, I think it would be something like a wildflower fire that comes across the farm, which can happen. Or grass fire or something that comes through and burns your crops and takes out a lot of things. We go flood. We're in the Skagit Valley. I always think it's maybe like Baker Dam breaks or something, like some big thing, But maybe we're dead then, and it doesn't matter. So even better, right? But I just kind of think about those really big things. What are they? The number 9 earthquake? Something really major. Although even that, the plants might be okay. So it's that. But the thing you can't imagine, the hailstorm that came through and just pulverized something at just the wrong time.
Do you know anybody that like kind of goes along? It seems like obviously like one catastrophic event. Okay, I'm obviously going to document this, but do you know anybody who has a systematic documentation of like, oh, I lost this, a couple thousand here. This would.
I don't even do that.
Yeah.
I'm bad about that. I tell everybody else to do it. Like it's $1,000. I know it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, it probably should. I mean, one of the things I think about is like it got to, I think it got below 40 at our farm last night.
Yeah.
I mean, it was cold. It's cold tonight too, but not as cold. And I'm like, we're colder than the airport here. We run about 4 degrees colder over there.
Yeah.
And they live near us. And I think, wow, what would happen if it frosted right now? We've got 4 more weeks of dahlias on, and that's about, what is that, $6,000-7,000 a week, It's like, okay, that might be it, So, kind of go, I mean, we get lulled into Mother Nature's synthetic prisoners,
Those are things you said about the germination issues, because I feel like if we had last year, like we had a really bad carrot germination year, and that was and we could document like what we expected to get and what we got the year before, so we probably could have.
Oh, that would be, I would think something like that. I don't know for sure though.
Yeah.
I would. Jada's great if you are interested. I mean,
right. It's figuring out at what point is it like worth the paperwork, probably.
Yeah.
right. And I would say about the paperwork that I did not find it terribly painful because they walked me through it so beautifully, and it was like they just asked for this thing and that thing and a little bit of back forth, but it wasn't like you had to do it yourself. And that was that. I guess the paperwork's there so people don't aren't fraudulent, which the U.S. government has to have. So the bureaucracy is like. But we don't have food safety to deal with, so you guys who are growing food are like probably up to here with regulations and paperwork already. I can imagine.
I'm curious about back to the markets, like the loss of markets part of it. do they ask you to provide, so it seems like it's different for you because you've documented that almost your whole business goes to the co-op,
Yeah,
but do they require that you to show like commitment from buyers or records of sales? Because I
I
can see
think it would
like,
be records of sales.
So
I don't think
records of
commitments,
not-
yeah. I don't think it's commitments, I think it's records of sales, because they're
Okay.
going, it's all your history, it's all based on your history. So I would guess that you don't have to do anything about the future, it's just.
so like, you know,
last
if
year.
a farm, you know, if like a big buyer of yours that's historically bought from you and said they're gonna buy again, and then this year they're like, oh, actually, California prices are so low, we're not gonna buy from you? Is that something that would be eligible?
I think it's.
If
we're
you
talking-
couldn't, like,
Yeah,
make
I think like sometimes you get you got all your eggs in one basket so much you can't move it fast enough, right, to something somewhere else that, I would think so. I would ask your agent, but I would think that, you know, I think that was like, the answer I got was you just need to prove that you made an effort to get it sold.
So how do you prove that you?
That would be a question for the agent,
Records
yeah,
of
like,
emails or like I made
I-
a phone
yeah,
call on this
yeah.
date.
I mean, and obviously, the things that they're not, probably you're not gonna be fraudulent about that anyway, because you get more money if you actually sell it, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of a beautifully designed program, actually, that way. But I do think, I think one of the reasons I was so, when Kate called me up and said, hey, you wanna come do this? And I'm like, I would love to, and the reason was because I feel like this is actually one of those programs that's actually really, really good for people who are like family farmers, small farm sized people that are really working to make it their way of life and a living. And I feel like not enough people are using it and the program might go away. And it has a lot of merit, I think. Only if it, you know, investigate it, only if it works for you. But it just seems to me, it's that level where you get past being a beginner, or like scrap past. I mean, you're always scrapping it when you're a farmer, but you get into that stage where you actually really can pay your bills farming, and you want to keep that lifestyle, you know.
But it sounds like, I mean, you said you paid $1,800 for like, what was it, $10,000 policy?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're probably not getting the beginner farmer additional discount.
Well, that was that other program.
But there were some, there
But
were
there are
additional
some beginning farmers
subsidies.
for it
Yeah.
too. Oh, that's
It's just-
wonderful.
I
Yeah.
can't remember what.
10 years or 10 years or.
Yeah, there was a beginning farmer thing.
That was
too.
additional 10%.
Oh, that's fantastic. That, you know, that's something I gotta say, I did not expect to really find so many people working in USDA and so many programs in USDA that actually are helpful. I was shocked about that. When I got in, I just was like, wow, there is actually some stuff in here that is decent, my idea of decent use of taxpayer money.
Yeah, I
And-
think it's kind of new, like it's in the last farm bill.
And there are a few, I meant something, I went to Washington DC with some other folks to kind of help advocate for farming, because it's flower farming, because it's a kind of its own special industry, hasn't really had a lot of representation. And, well, the people lobbying for flowers are not from the US in DC,
Sure.
for the most part. And so we're just going, hey, you know, this is also a domestic product, and, you know, kind of get on the map that way a little bit. And so I met some different people at USDA who were fairly high up, because, you know, they'll meet with groups like that at times. And I was impressed by how much passion there was for the beginning farmer rancher program. And there were people really, really dedicated to their jobs. You know, they're always third level down. they're the ones you don't know their names, but they're really smart and they're working really hard. I found that, but that was a few years ago.
Yeah, well, any other questions or thoughts? I mean, I think something that comes to mind, yeah, I mean, obviously all these insurance programs, it's like, in a way, it's like, you never want to use them, and it always kind of seems like, like, it's not worth it, but until it's like totally worth it.
Well,
You know,
yeah,
and
I just
it
saw
can happen
one.
pretty quick.
I just saw one. I have a friend who's starting a Protea farm in Maui, and she had neighbors there that this beautiful vegetable farm, and Hawaii doesn't have enough local farming going on. Actually, they bring so much in, and it was they you know, that hurricane that came through. It wasn't the hurricane. They're in Maui, and they got the fires. They got all the winds and no rain, and their whole farm was devastated by the fire. And they raised like 40 grand on Kickstarter. So if you have, or GoFundMe. So I mean, if you have connections, maybe you don't need this, but it's like, I was looking at that going, oh my God, you know, how good would it be if you didn't have to worry about that on top of the you know, traumatic disaster. There was one I saw that wasn't doing so well in their Kickstarter program or GoFundMe was one in Colorado that they had like flash floods. Maybe we're not prone to flash floods here, but you just don't think about that stuff, and who wants to, right?
Well, thank you so much
Oh,
for
I hope it was
sharing your
helpful
experience.
a little bit. I don't
We
know.
like real world examples.
Yeah. So far, I'll let you know. Hopefully never.
Check back in April.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, for those of you who maybe aren't at the point where you're going to be purchasing this right now, it's a really good idea to kind of have this on your radar and something to kind of work toward. It is part of your larger plan of scaling up and different tools to help you do that.
Yeah, definitely. And a good reason to, when you're ready to be doing those Schedule Fs and keeping all those records and all that stuff that's a pain in the butt, but actually gets you to, kind of helps you build your business. It's another reason to do that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Diane.